It's it. Welcome, Allison.
Welcome, Carlos.
Episode numero 23.
23.
23, right?
Yeah.
Who do we have? We have a really great interview today.
We do. We have.
Are we gonna call it interview?
We didn't really interview her. She was excellent. She told us everything we wanted to know. We talked with a friend of mine, Rebecca Hines. She's my favorite District 5 school board member.
Is she the only one you know?
Yeah. She's still my favorite.
All right, here she goes. Hey, Rebecca, how you doing today?
Hey there, how are y'all?
We are doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time to come talk with us. We've been trying to get you on for a while, but this week was perfect. So for those of you who do not know Rebecca, this is a good friend of mine, but also a leader in the Chapin community. She is chairman, is that the right word? Chairman of the District 5 School Board. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know obviously that is not your primary paying job, but tell us how you got into the school board realm of politics, so to speak.
Right, well, so I am Rebecca Hines. I have 3 kids, and with my husband Derek, and Derek is an educator. He was a high school teacher and football coach for several years and works at the College of Education now with USC. And when we decided to have a family, like I said, we have 3 kids. We have Harper is almost 10, Molly is 7, and we have a late in life surprise, Henry. He is 5 months old. And when Harper was starting to I'm sorry, I'm like all over the place. You might have to.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Basically, what we want to know is how did you get involved into the?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when Harper was getting to be school aged and we moved to Chapin, we started paying attention to our local school district because our kids were going to be in school. And like I said, my husband's in education, so we know how important it is to be informed and involved.
Mm-hmm.
So I started going to school board forums during elections and realized that at the time we had folks that had been on the school board for a long time. And I really knew nothing about school boards because when you don't have kids and, you know, we had just bought our first house, when you're not in that realm, you really don't pay attention to how important a school district is to your community. So I started realizing that as I paid attention to the local elections and started attending school board meetings. And I really felt like there wasn't a voice for parents, especially parents of young kids that were going to start from the very beginning and go all the way through, represented on the board at the time. And my husband and I talked about it, and because I was already so involved in the business community and we've lived here and we want our kids to be raised here and our grandkids to be raised here, we just felt a calling, and I felt a calling to be a voice.
How long ago have you been?
How long ago did I start paying attention?
No, how long ago have you been involved in the board, or have you had a
So when were you elected to the school board?
I was elected in 2020, and I started paying attention to the school board in about 2017, 2018. So I attended school board meetings for a few years before I even decided to run.
Mm-hmm.
We had thought about, I had thought about, when I say we, my family does everything. We make our decisions together. So we had thought about that for a couple of years prior to me deciding to run. And honestly, when I made the decision to run, this was pre-COVID. So we had decided that, okay, well, in 2020, I'm going to run for school board. And COVID hit in March of 2020, and I was slammed because at the time I worked for the Chamber of Commerce, and I was working with small businesses that had, in an environment where everything had shut down and our schools had shut down. And I never would have imagined that in 2023 we would still even be talking about this. It is crazy how everything changed right in the middle of that decision to run for the board. And really, we've all kind of been learning as we go.
We moved here 10 years ago. You know that I was in education for 10 years prior to that. And the reason we chose Chapin was for the school system. But honestly, even coming from the educator background, I didn't pay attention to a lot going on within the schools until 2020. So you really jumped in when everything was on fire.
Everything was on fire, and everything about education is different now than it was 3 years ago. I mean, every conversation that you have, every priority that community members have, teachers have, students, parents, everything is different. And so,
when you say different, Rebecca, can you explain a little more? Can you go deeper into why it's different? What's the main difference for you?
Right. Well, I'm speaking as a parent and as a board member. I think one of the things that COVID really did was it made parents pay attention to what their kids were learning. I think that it shifted the way kids learn. And so we all kind of had to figure it out together, in the sense that, before COVID, you had textbooks and you weren't on the computer. And my kids weren't allowed to use technology before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everything has shifted to a technology-based learning system with Chromebooks and laptops and Google Meets, and your textbooks are on your computer and you're not carrying them around. And so, it's kind of, parents were having to teach their kids how to use technology. Kids were teaching their parents how to use technology. Parents were paying more attention to what they were learning in school because they were becoming the teacher for a while, especially when we were virtual and, even in a hybrid virtual model. And even now, parents are paying more attention because you're using that technology. And they're having to be more involved. I think that really put the focus more on what your kids were learning for a lot of folks, and how they were learning. And from an educator standpoint, all educators had to shift on how they teach because we have a school district full of amazing educators that prior to 2020, they learned how to teach in a totally different format. And they have completely shifted on a dime. I guess it wasn't necessarily overnight, because it did, we have had some wins and fails when it comes to online and virtual learning, but everybody has had to shift their mindset on how to teach and how to learn. And I think we're still kind of figuring that out. So, you have high school students right now that learn how to read and write with papers and pencils and books. And, I have an elementary school student that started kindergarten in COVID on a Chromebook, reading on a Chromebook, and learning that technology before she really learned the basics. So it'll be interesting to see how that all fleshes out.
And I think we won't know the effects of it for years to come, for sure. And I understand the shift, and I understand why, but thinking about the different learning modalities, I have major concerns with everything being electronic. And
well, that's human nature, to have a little bit of resistance to changes. But the fact is that what are you going to do if the government, the federal government, tells you have to leave your kid at home? Correct?
Right. Well, the federal government should never tell you that you have to do something with your child. But
I like that.
What I will say is that when it comes to how we've shifted the learning model, we've talked about this in school board meetings, especially as we talk about curriculum or we approve textbooks and going, we've had different things come up on different ways of introducing material to students. The problem with us going all virtual the way that we did is that you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Mm-hmm. So we can't just shut down all of our Chromebooks and redistribute textbooks. Yeah. Because it's just, first of all, I think all of our educators would boycott because it has really been tough for them to get to this point. I recognize that. Yeah. I think, and parents too. We finally have started getting used to this as the new norm, but I have the same concerns, Allison, with my kids.
But that's a future. That's a future in the real world. The future in the real world is operated by computers or technology, like you said.
It is. But
there is an advantage to be early and have kids that feel very comfortable, operating computers and researching on their computers rather than grabbing a book. I get that part. I don't think that's going back.
Oh, no, it's definitely not going back. I feel like you have to have balance, but I also feel like now, as you said, with putting that genie back in the bottle, that's where parents come in and where we put the books in their hands and, make sure that those library books that they are still bringing home are utilized and that type of thing. But, my kids... With starting school this week, it's been interesting. They've been fine. I didn't have all the paper coming home this week like I have previously.
Which makes you feel like you're missing something?
It totally makes me feel like I'm missing something. I'm like searching my email. So I do like that part of it, I think. We're getting away from that some, but occasionally a piece of paper isn't bad as a reminder because I
personally don't carry paper anymore. Everything is on my phone, on my computer, on the cloud. I embrace that technology part, and I appreciate it that all the teachers are making an extra effort to go that route because undoubtedly that's where everybody's going. It is.
So I feel like that's been a big change in the district, but probably across the board in education. Obviously, the other huge change that I've seen since we moved here, and I think most other people have, is the increase in the amount of students and people and cars. And I think that has been the question of the week. So that was...
car lines and all of the things.
All of the things. Carlos and I had lunch together today, and he said, it took me 45 minutes to get my kid to school today. I said, well, I can one-up you. It took me an hour yesterday, and I'm a whole lot closer.
Is that something, Rebecca, that you as a board can bring as an issue and can work and try to find a solution for it?
So that is something that both the board and the administration are currently trying to address. Mm-hmm. We have a 5-year study that is, or a 5-year plan that is being presented to the district. We have hired consultants to review all of our facilities and our enrollment numbers across all 3 clusters. In Chapin, I know we see that growth exacerbated, probably more so than any of the other 2 clusters do, and that's reflected in our numbers.
Sorry, what 3 clusters are you referring to?
So, clusters in District 5 are the Chapin cluster, the Dutch Fork cluster, and the Irmo cluster, and it's really geographically just the 3 little areas of our community.
Mm-hmm.
To where all the schools feed,
with
all
the school clusters.
Neighborhoods
so
feed
there's a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school, and there's an intermediate school. In all of the clusters, the intermediate school in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters feed into the same intermediate school, and Chapin feeds into one intermediate school. And then there are currently 3 middle schools: Chapin Middle School, Dutch Fork Middle School, and Irmo Middle School. And then there are elementary schools in each cluster that feed into those higher level schools. I said that backwards, but that's, how those clusters work.
Yeah.
In Chapin, we have seen a lot of growth in the last 5 to 10 years. People have been moving out towards this area of the district, and there's growing pains with that. District 5 used to be very well known for the Irmo cluster, Irmo High School. And just as, folks move to South Carolina, you just move to where there's new growth, new houses. I mean, you both know that. And so several years ago, Chapin was a 2A high school.
Yeah.
And is a 5A high school and is busting at the seams.
And the growth is still coming.
That we're trying to address, because you have that issue where Chapin has exploded, and you see overcrowding, and you see, we've built a new elementary school off of Amex Ferry, and you see this week everybody at the intermediate school. I would be surprised if there's not a record number of fifth grade classes. I could be wrong on that, but it just seems like it is exploding. Chapin Middle School is almost at capacity. Chapin High School is almost at capacity. So you have those issues of overcrowding. Whereas in the Irmo cluster, what you see is you have schools that have been there for a long time. So those facilities need extensive renovations or they need to be completely rebuilt. They need new construction. So we're building a whole new wing of Irmo High School. Irmo High School is, it has been built in stages, and there is just, there was an extreme need for a new facility for those students to learn in. And so you have elementary schools in the Irmo cluster that, have been around for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So there's just a lot of need, and there are different needs in each cluster. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing this study, to really, there was one done, an MD-Con study that was done several years ago, but we're doing an updated one just because of the growth that we've seen. And there will be some tough decisions to be made in our district.
Is there a limit? Is there a limit of the students that you can get into any school? Like, is there a cap?
Say what now?
Is there a limit of a number of students that you can accept in any given school?
There are capacity levels in each school. And I can tell you, in our Chapin schools, most of our schools are very close to capacity.
So how does that work, Rebecca, though, with it being a public school? And I know for a fact, we were just talking about this, within a 5-mile radius from our office right now, there are 4 brand new neighborhoods going up that, those people will be moved into the schools probably by spring, definitely by next year, not to mention all the other neighborhoods that are expanding. But you can't turn kids away if they're zoned for the school.
So you can't do that, but you can do what everybody doesn't want to do, and that is rezoning or redistricting, whatever you want to say. I think some folks like to say redistricting because it doesn't sound as bad as rezoning. I'm not really sure what that rationale is, but it's the same thing. It's rezoning, and you're going to have to shift those lines. And like I said, we're doing that study, and those lines will be presented to us based off of projection population growth in each cluster, and they take into account the new neighborhoods that are coming up, and what the zoning laws have been updated in the Chapin area. But the problem is, from my understanding, if you've already bought the property, if a developer's already bought the property, then that doesn't really matter. They're grandfathered into what those laws or those regulations or zoning rules were before. So, these folks that we've brought in, they're taking all of that into account. But I really do think that what you will see in the next year is that we will have to shift lines. And that means that there will be folks in Chapin that are impacted. And and really probably all of the clusters, because we'll have to shift lines to move students over to the other two, the Dutch Fork cluster and the Irmo cluster. I don't have specifics on what that looks like right now. I know that we have a conversation at our board meeting on Monday where we will have an initial discussion on that, and we're bringing those folks in again to really kind of get into what that looks like. One of the things that the board did vote on this year was to eliminate the intermediate model. So that has been included in the plans and projections that are going to be presented to us. So what that means is we will have 4 middle schools. As far as, that was the last conversation was that we would have 4 middle schools, and the intermediate schools would not, Chapin Middle School would move to where Chapin Intermediate is. Chapin Middle School would be Spring Hill Middle School, and then there would be they would split the intermediate schools in Irmo and Dutch Fork. I believe that that's how.
And is that something that would take effect for the 24 or 25 school year?
So I don't think that it will, because in order to take, this is probably more specific to Chapin, because Chapin's intermediate school is a 5th and 6th grade model.
Mm-hmm.
The intermediate school in Irmo is a 6th grade model. So Irmo and Dutch Fork elementary schools have the 5th grade. In Chapin, they do not have the 5th grade.
And they're still full.
The intermediate school, we have to move 5th grade back to elementary school.
Correct.
And the big problem with that is Lake Murray Elementary, because at Lake Murray Elementary is still pretty close to capacity, even though we built another school to alleviate that issue. And so but Piney Woods, where Piney Woods is located, it doesn't necessarily draw away from where a lot of students in Lake Murray reside. So there are going to be tough conversations for that school. And I think what will end up happening is there will have to be modifications made to Lake Murray. That's what I think will end up having to happen. But, like I said, we'll see what the folks present to us.
And how long does a study like that take?
How long does it take?
Mm-hmm.
We have final answers. Like I said, we're doing an initial conversation on Monday. They are presenting 2 major plans to us in October and in November, and by November we should really know what we need to do. Mm-hmm. From what we have been told. We retained them probably, all of the months run together, but in the late spring. So they've been working on it for several months. And part of this, and part of bringing them in and trying to determine these lines and determining where the growth is and all of that is, we know that we have significant capital needs in our district, and that includes new schools, not necessarily in Chapin. And so there is conversation of having a bond on the ballot in 24. So what that looks like, I don't know. From what I know that the district is trying to do is they're trying to, pass a bond that does not raise taxes. I don't know how that looks. That hasn't been presented to us in definite terms. One of the things that as you start getting all of this information and you get opinions, plans change. So
yeah,
it could be different.
You're touching
November, but hopefully, we're pretty consistent in what we expect to happen in November of this year, 23. But we're trying to make sure that we have plenty of time of knowing what we need to do, so that we have a year to plan and to get feedback from the community on what
the best solution is.
Everyone.
Yeah, and that's a lot of responsibility on that board. You're talking about infrastructure, you're talking about solving the overpopulation. That is not something you created, it's something that you're presented to. You're also touching the subject of technology, of how to teach. Do you also oversee the materials, the subjects that kids look at school and stuff like that?
So curriculum,
That's the word that I was trying to.
curriculum and state standards are set by the State Department of Education. We do approve, all of our textbooks, but really all of that comes from guidance from the State Department of Education and what's approved to be in schools from higher level. I mean, we're paying attention. There's a lot of conversations about what is in schools right now, and we pay attention to that. Like I said, we don't, we're not educators. We have a former principal on our board right now, but really the 7 of us are representative of different types of professionals in our community, and we're not educators. So education curriculum is really set at the state level with the Department of Education, but we do pay attention to what is being taught in our schools as much as we can, from an oversight perspective, not necessarily an operational perspective.
So you don't have a saying, let's say, yes, this is something that we want in our district, or no, this is something that we don't want in our district.
We have a say that what is in our district has to be tied to state curriculum and state standards. So if something is in our and a state law, so that cannot be, obviously in your schools, but that is right now, a hot topic that we're all trying to figure out, because what's being put in schools now is not necessarily what was put in schools 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and it hasn't necessarily been, depending on who you talk to, updated in the curriculum. But those are conversations that we have, for sure.
Gotcha.
Y'all have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I feel like you get sometimes people give you a really hard time when you're trying to do the right thing for the children and the community, and it's a job you couldn't pay me enough to have.
Cannot pay somebody enough.
So I greatly appreciate you.
But somebody has to do it.
I will say this: if I were to say anything to just based, reflecting on some of our conversations, when you talk about what's in schools and car line issues and growth issues and all of those topics that get people pretty heated. One of the things that I think has changed as well since 2020, and maybe our district is a little bit unique. Maybe people were more involved in District 5 than other districts, but people are paying attention to school boards now. And that is a good thing and a bad thing. And I don't mean bad. And what I mean is, what I would want people to know is that there is a process and a chain of command in school districts. And so what we see more of right now is that when someone has an issue, like Carline, I'm using Carline because we have both.
Yeah.
You have an issue like Carline, before you call the school to see if it was a one-off, or if something happened, or, what have you, people come straight to the board. Or if there's an issue with a student in a school, if they got in trouble, or if something happened between a student and a teacher, they'll go straight to the school board.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is we do not have
the resources to deal.
Operational authority. Yeah. We have oversight authority. We have one employee. The school board has one employee, and that is the superintendent. And there is a chain of command to get to the superintendent. So I always, when I have folks that reach out to me because something has happened in a classroom or at a school or car line, my first response is to go to the teacher or to go to the principal. And if that doesn't work, go to the district office, and the district office will go to the superintendent and then bring it to us. Because we have that oversight role, we also have a quasi-judicial role. So when something happens where a student gets in trouble, or a teacher gets in trouble, or an administrator gets in trouble, or anything like that, if we are involved from the start and there is an appeal, that board member cannot participate because they have already been biased in the situation. And I don't think people, I think there are people that don't realize that. So that's why it is so important to follow the chain of command.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that happen, and people just don't know because they, you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Rebecca, if you could send a message to everybody, because let me tell you, one of the things that make Chapin great is the school district, the school system. Everybody talks, and again, it's as a double-edged sword. People move here because of the school district, and now they're moving too many people here and it's affecting the school district, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think that I'm very happy with the type of education my son is getting here, and with the level of commitment from people like you and teachers that are working hard to, take care of our kids for the majority of the day. So, is there something that you want to say to everybody that is listening, and to the people that have kids and they are worried about the future of their kids, they're worried about the future of the school district,
Well, I think the biggest thing that I could say, if you're worried about the education that your child is getting in District 5 or any of that, is to not listen to everything that you hear on social media. We have one of the best school districts in the state, and hands down, we are not perfect. No one is perfect. But if you compare our district to almost any other district in the state, not just the Midlands, we have a top-notch school district. We have amazing teachers and administrators, and you can never. You can attempt to get perfection, but you're never going to reach that level. We're doing the very best that. We have a great school district. Social media, to me, I know a lot of people they give me a hard time about it, because I really do feel like social media has just shown the ugly side of humanity. Yeah. And you listen to folks get online and go back and forth and say things that are just not true. And people that aren't as involved will just listen to it as gospel. So that would be what I would take away is, don't listen to social media. And if there are questions that you have about your child or your district or your board members or what have you, give them a call. Speak to them. Because what I have found is you get more accomplished in a conversation than you ever will on social media or email. I just won't engage in that, because you can read a statement in a tone that is
completely different of what it meant.
Yep.
And that's why you're here. That's why you're here. So people can actually hear you saying the things that you say. Exactly. You hit the nail right there.
Yes.
It's refreshing to hear that, we're gearing towards that, and our school district is still top notch. Yes, there are some issues, but there's issues everywhere. But our issues are something that are not affecting in a way that it's
the learning environment
correct
for children.
And
right. We see the same issues, the mental health issues, because of the impact of COVID and technology that everybody in the world has seen. But I think we are addressing them in probably one of the best ways that we can, in several of the best ways that we can, but better than a lot of our districts in the state. So, and we do have involved parents and involved teachers, and I think that makes a really big difference.
So now you just created more people wanting to move here.
Right. Well,
tell them to call us if they do.
Cool. I don't think listens there.
Rebecca, thank you so much. We're running out of time. We appreciate it. We're probably gonna call you by the end of the school year to review the year. I mean, it's been, I don't think I've had sit down and had a conversation, half an hour conversation with you before, and I certainly have a ton more questions to ask, and definitely want to know a lot more, and maybe even get involved, not in a way as you do, but go ahead.
Elections are in 24,
Uh-huh.
so filing starts next August. You have a year to decide to run for school board. Is this an announcement?
No, no, by no means, by no means. I will vote for you probably.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and hope everyone in District 5 has a great year.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Awesome, thank you, Rebecca. What do you think about that, huh?
I think that was great. It has been a whirlwind of a week with the kids starting school.
Yeah.
And she was able to touch on some really spicy subjects that I've seen floating around social media, text, just talking to other parents in the grocery store. And people are very passionate, but it's because they care and it's about the kids. And
Well, you're talking about people's kids.
That's
You know,
right.
their kids. Of course, they're going to be passionate. What I do like is the fact that there is a plan to solve the problems. I also like the fact that she's very confident that the school system is in a great spot right now.
Yeah.
You know, with some stuff that needs to be worked on, but
I don't think there's anywhere that doesn't need work.
Yeah.
And I mean, just our nation in general, I feel like is seeing tremendous growth. So unless you're in a very rural community,
Yeah.
I would assume that most really good public school districts are
That there will
dealing
be
with
growth.
this at the same
Yeah.
time as we are.
you know what I want to do, Allison? I want to invite her over as soon as that study gets done.
Yeah, that would be great to really find out what the results are
Yeah.
and what this company suggests, because I think I think that's what scares people is the unknown. There are so many possibilities of what could possibly be done, and the unknown is scarier than
Well,
the known,
there's
even
one
if you're
thing.
not happy with it.
One thing that we know for sure is, and as a real estate agent, you know, you want to tell the potential buyers, you know, of a property that the school might change, you know, and
Absolutely. That's one thing people ask me. They'll say, now I just want to make sure if I buy this house, my child's going to go to XYZ school. And I'll say, no. And I'm a prime example of it.
Yeah.
When we bought 10 years ago, I mean, we really looked at where the schools were and where the houses were. And we said, if we buy in this neighborhood, we will never have to worry about rezoning. 7 years later, we were rezoned. And you know what? It wasn't the end of the world.
it was. And I mean, if you know, how many schools do you know now? Like,
That I've had children attend.
yes.
At this point, they've attended 3 different elementary schools, intermediate, middle, and high. So I've been through 6 schools in the Chapin cluster.
And you seem to be happy with each one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was in education for 10 years, so I know nothing's perfect. I mean, we're humans, right?
Yeah.
So everything has its faults, but at the end of the day, everybody's trying to do what's best for our children. And my children are happy. They're learning.
Yeah.
They're safe.
Yeah.
And that's all I can ask for.
And that's all we can ask for. I mean, and I don't want to compare with the bad so you can feel good about yourself, but if you look into perspective, you know, if you compare the school system that we have here with other school systems in the country, and even if you go farther away and you compare it to the school system in other countries like Venezuela, where they come from, I mean, this system is still light years ahead of what we used to have in there.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's perfect. Again, you know, like I don't wanna jump into that adjective, you know, that is beautiful and perfect and nothing needs to be changed. I mean, there's always that thrive for perfection, but you'll never get it, you know.
Never get it.
Anyway, we are past our 30 minutes.
We are. That's okay.
That's fine, and that's it. That's the end of the show. Please subscribe if you haven't. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Rebecca.
Yep.
She was what were you gonna say?
I was going to say see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.